Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Crown Jewels on the PLD Projects Network. I am your host, PLD, and yes, welcome back. It has been a few weeks between episodes, but I am glad to be back with this one. This is a big one, folks. This might be a longer episode. We've reached one of the greatest hits of the band, and a well-rocking hit from the band, one that was played a lot throughout the band's career, so we do have a lot to listen to. And obviously, if this is your first time here, please hit that like, that subscribe, that bell, leave comments, let me know what you think, all that jazz. But first, I should tell you what we do on this podcast. In this podcast, I go through every song in the history of Queen, including solo tracks. We go through them one by one, and we take a look at all the different alternate versions, live versions, studio versions, edited versions, remix versions, and we pick out which one is the crown jewel of that song. And that version we will add to our playlist, the Crown Jewels playlist. And beyond that, I will also dive deep, give you a history of the track, and I will give it a ranking, and rate it, and I will actually see if it slides into my personal top 10. My top 10 Queen fans tracks of all time, although I'm thinking of actually expanding it out to 20. I'm not sure yet. Now, if you look below in the description, you're going to see a lot of links. One link is to my Google Sheet, which keeps a lot of information in there for you to peruse at your leisure. You're also going to see a lot of YouTube links. Now, this is when we go through every alternate version. I try to provide a link so that you can listen to it on your own. So I'll be asking you to pause my podcast, go to YouTube, listen to it, come back so we can discuss it. So after all that, here we are with Now I'm Here. Now I'm Here was written by Brian May. It features Freddie on lead and backing vocals as well as the organ. Brian plays guitars, does backing vocals, and plays piano. John plays bass, and Roger plays drums and also does backing vocals. Now, this was released as a single in the UK, January 17th, 1975. It hit number 11 on the UK charts. It was also released in the Netherlands, where it hit number 32, and Japan, where it hit number 87. This was written after Brian and the band toured America with Mott the Hoople. For the first time, Brian was very intrigued about how rock was perceived in America, and they had a very, very fun time with Mott, and Mott stayed close friends throughout the rest of their career. Now, as I said earlier, this track was one of the most played songs in Queen history. That's why we have so many versions to listen to. Once written, it featured in the set list, many times even opening the show from 1974 all the way through Freddie's last tour in 1986. It was also played at the tribute concert, and Brian even played on his first solo tour. Surprisingly, though, that was the last time it was played for quite a while. Brian didn't play on his second solo tour, and I was actually very shocked that Paul Rodgers never played it during his tenure with the band. It was finally resurrected for the Queen and Adam Lambert tour, especially because Queen and Adam Lambert started focusing on some of the more early eras of Queen, which, if you're thinking about the early eras of Queen, this is one of those key songs. Now, before we go listen to the first version, the album version, I do have a few quotes to finish up our notes and quotes section. The first was from Freddie Mercury, as spoken to Record Mirror in 1976. He said, "That was nice. That was a Brian May thing. We released it after Killer Queen, and it's a total contrast. Just a total contrast. It was just to show people we can still do rock and roll. We haven't forgotten our rock and roll roots. It's nice to do on stage. I enjoy doing that on stage." Another quote was from Brian May, saying, "We'd done a few things before I was ill, but when I came back, they'd done a load more, including a couple of backing tracks of songs by Freddie which I hadn't heard, like Flick of the Wrist, which excited me and gave me a lot of inspiration to get back in there and do some writing. Now I'm Here was done in that period. The song's about experiences on the American tour, which really blew me away. I was bowled over by the amazing aura rock music has in America." Now, this, of course, was Brian talking about his illness during this tour of America, which had to cut the tour short. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, there were times where Brian was actually just concerned that the band might replace him. Should have been a real concern, but that's what it was like at the time. But that's enough of that. Let's get to some music. Let's get to listening to some music. Go down to the description below, find the album version. That's the first one we're going to listen to, and then we'll be right back. Here I stand. Here I stand. And welcome back. There it is. Now I'm Here. Little spoiler, I didn't want to say anything before listening to it. This is a song that works so much better live. Not going to lie. It's not that it doesn't work in the studio, but this song really gets going live, the energy of the crowd, the energy and the playfulness of the jamming sessions. So when you hear the live version, going back to the studio version, it's always going to be tough. But there's a lot to like in here as well. Of course, you start off with a lot of the repetitive motions like on the guitar. It's kind of like the Brayton Rock solo, a little bit of repeat here and there. Also, some great use of repeats on Freddie's voice as it pans across the headphone here in the left, here in the right. This is going to be used later on, and actually to better effect, I would say, in the Prophet song from A Night at the Opera. It's kind of a weird, trippy, very mellow opening. And then when the I'm Just kicks in, Roger really kicks in with the drums and the song just gets filthy. There's some nice vocal moments in here as well, nice vocal choir moments, but they don't really use a studio like you would think they would. It's almost like they want to just do it live. The whole song feels beyond the effects used in the vocals as far as the panning goes. The rest of it feels like they just want to get up there, play the song live, and rock out to it. There's no verse, chorus here. It's just like movements. The second time through the movement, so to speak, Brian does take charge, letting Freddie be a little bit more playful as it goes into the solo section where the organ and the piano fills in this thick background, letting Brian do this really rip-roaring and playful solo. Not over the top. It's not like it soars out over the top and like covers anything. It's just part of the music. It's part of a jam session. It's very energetic. Then, of course, it breaks back down, and we have another set of those playful vocal repeats, and then we go into a nice outro section, a little jam section session with "Don't I Love You So," and the nice little go little Queenie moments with the guitar outro before it fades out. It's a great song, but I really can't wait for you to go on to the live version because that's where this song really kicks in. But we aren't quite there yet. We do have one other studio version to listen to, and then I will mention two other studio versions that we aren't going to listen to. But let's go to the one we are going to listen to first. This is from the BBC session from October 16th, 1974. As always, the link is below in the description. Click on it, and we'll come back and talk about it. And we're back. Welcome back. Now, if you listen closely, you're going to say, I didn't hear a whole lot of a difference. There wasn't a whole hell of a lot of difference in that one. Because like many of the BBC tracks Queen did, they started off using the same basic backing track. In this case, Freddie did have a different vocal take, and Brian did get to add a little bit more during the guitar solo, both of which I'm happy to say are definitely improvements on the studio version, which I did like. I'd like Freddie's vocal take is just much more of a live version, which is why I gravitate towards it, a bit between the two studio sessions, as it were. And Brian gets to play a little more. It's a lot more fun for him, I think. Gets to layer a little bit more guitar on top, sounds much more like a jam session, sounds a little more live. I do like this version quite a bit. But it's not quite the same as the live versions. But before we get there, we do have two studio versions to tackle. We're not going to listen to them because I don't have YouTube links for them. But it's okay because it's not a whole lot to listen to. First off, we have the alternative Trident reel-to-reel tape version. This appeared on a Trident 10-inch reel-to-reel that was discovered in, I think, 2012 or so. At least that's when it became public. It was sourced from Trident Studios directly. This version of Now I'm Here is the album version. One little small addition. You do hear the engineer, a guy named Mike Stone, a very, very important man in Queen's history and very much a very dear friend to the band. You can hear him shout out something like, "Let's have some rock and roll," right before the guitars kick in. But that's really it. So again, that's not much to talk about, really. Now, I will say there is another rumored version of a track out there. I call it the longer outro version. Not sure exactly what it is. It came from a Queen scholar. I'm betting it's just the jam session. The tape ran a little bit longer. That supposedly might be out there. I've never heard it, so I can't really tell you much more about it. So that's it. Let's move on to the live versions. We're going to start with the earliest version we have, Live at the Rainbow from 1974. Click on that link below and then come back for more. Now I'm here. Well, there you have it, Live at the Rainbow from 1974, the November concert. The video, you get to see the great way the band played with theatricality with the opening, with the lights and the going back and forth across the stage. Freddie's growling voice really makes it work more live. I like Freddie's voice live always tended to have much more of a deep like earthy quality to it. He could still do some of the higher register stuff as well, but he definitely tended to be more guttural with it, and it works for this song. Roger's drums really work more powerful live. It's a really tight version, though. At this point in their career, they haven't evolved a whole hell of a lot from the studio version, so it sounds pretty similar in some ways. It's still a great version. I think it's better than the studio version, but we're going to get even better. The end seems a little bit short compared to some of the times to come, although Roger has some great fills, and I like the ending instead of the fade out, of course. I don't really like fading out as much. It works for studios, but I like hearing it live for that exact reason. You get that different ending. But let's not waste any time. Let's move right on to the next one we have, live from the Hammersmith Odeon, 1975. Be back soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Queen.
And we are back. Hot damn, that's a good version. I do love that version quite a bit. It opens again right away. It's just a tick faster. Feels like it's a little more confident. Freddie's voice is definitely more confident at this point. I really feel it's amazing the difference a year can make. And I'm not sure if it's just the mix, but man, this mix is loud, proud, and you really feel like you're right there watching the band. Brian's solo is sick in this version. I think the band is much more comfortable, and a little bit more playfulness between everybody. And Roger's ending is just like, I couldn't help but air drum at the end. The ending feels like he did the same type of thing he did in the Rainbow, but it was more powerful. Again, might be the mix, I'm not sure. But this is a great version of the track, and I can't wait to listen to more, because I think if I had to guess, my favorite version might be next. I don't know until the end. I'm going to listen to them all and we'll see. But I know the Live Killers album version is quite good. So let's get right to that from the Live Killers release, the first Queen live album release. Now I'm Here from Live Killers. Click and come back.
You are now going to sing. Okay.
Now, if you are waiting until the end of the podcast to listen, because they didn't go and pause it and listen and come back, well, you have a treat ahead of you, because this is one you definitely should listen to. I'm not sure it's going to win, but you should definitely listen to it. Now, according to queenlive.ca, it's a website dedicated to the live versions of Queen, which has a great article on Live Killers. This track was made up of different versions spliced up between Lion, Frankfurt of 1979, and an unknown source as well. I'm not sure why Live Killers did this. When the band created this album, they weren't as heavily involved, and they really took different sections of live tracks and kind of spliced them all together, Frankenstein them all together. But I don't honestly really care either way, because the outcome is wonderful. This version is really sped up, and it's rocking, man. The tempo, it almost makes the previous version seem like a slog, really, in comparison. It's like right from the get-go. It's right. It's just, the rhythm is powerful. It almost feels like they're ready to lose control, but they don't actually do it. John feels a little bit more powerful in the mix here. Freddie is all over the place in this track. He's playing with the crowd the entire song. He's definitely at his peak confidence level at this point already. That's even before we get to the actual singing give and take, because in the middle of the track we get a little bit of that Deo that Freddie became famous for, without the Deo part of it. It's definitely a give and take with the now I'm here, the singing, the audience singing, him singing, the audience singing. It's a great version of that. You really feel the energy of the crowd right there with you. And then when the band starts coming back in and playing while he's playing along, man, it's just rock and roll. It's just rock and roll at its best. It's a great version. The end is another great Roger ending, very powerful drumming. It's a longer version, that's why it's 8 minutes compared to like the 4 minutes, but it's really worth it. It's really worth listening to. So, and that was from Live Killers. Now we're going to move on to Queen Rock Montreal from 1981. If this is your first time going through the Queen catalog, you're doing it with me along, one song at a time, I'd be impressed, and it's kind of cool actually. But if it is, this is a medley, and it does include a song called Dragon Attack, which we won't have talked about yet. Dragon Attack was on the Game album from 1980, so we haven't gotten there. Well, you may be asking yourself, well, I've heard medleys before, you just take out the one track. Well, there's not a YouTube version with just the track, because it's a medley that goes from Now I'm Here into Dragon Attack, back into Now I'm Here for the reprise. So that's just how it is. So I'm going to listen to it as is. Feel free to listen to it. It's a great song. You get a little preview from the Game album. But here it is. Again, click in that description below. Get to that YouTube link. Now I'm Here, live in Montreal. The special bonus of Dragon Attack.
I think I'm gonna stay around.
Well, there you have it. Here's the speed of the Live Killer version. Definitely still has that fast rock and roll edge to it. This is still definitely peak Freddie. Freddie's vocals are very confident, very loud, very proud, very in your face. But specifically in this mix, I do love how clear Roger's backing vocals are. This is true of pretty much the whole Montreal album. Roger's vocals really are a draw to this album, quite a bit. The guitar solo is more of a jam session here than a solo, which works. Brian does get a little more of a lead towards the end of it. And there's nice syncopated bits there at one point before it goes into more of a true guitar solo. Freddie gets to do another little bit of sing-along, kind of like he did with the Live Killers, and this time John kind of plays the part of the audience as well and helps him out, just fooling around a little bit. That's when it breaks into Dragon Attack, which we'll get into at a later time. When Dragon Attack breaks down and finishes, that's when Freddie comes back with a little bit of playfulness, just like that repeat vocal right before the beginning, before breaking back to Now I'm Here with that down in the city, just so you and me, brings up such a raucous ending. I love how it ends that way. It's a great medley. Those two songs actually work very well together, even if Dragon Attack's a little more funkier than Now I'm Here is. But it's a pretty solid version overall. It's a similar version to the one we're going to listen to next. This time from Queen on Fire, live at the Bowl, recorded by Queen 1982 at the Milton Keynes Bowl in England. This is during the Hot Space Tour. They did a similar medley, Now I'm Here into Dragon Attack. However, there was kind of a big difference in touring for the band at this point. This is the first time they actually brought on a touring keyboardist. For the first time, it was not just the four of them on stage together. On this album, Morgan Fisher played keyboards. He was the very first touring musician to play with the band. They also had Fred Mandel play later on in the same tour before settling on Spike Edney, who became the basically fifth member of Queen. He's been there ever since, through a lot of the solo projects, through the tribute concert, through Queen Paul Rodgers, and still to this day, Queen and Adam Lambert. He's actually the musical director of the band now. Helps Brian and Roger arrange things as well as plays multi-instruments. But at this point, he isn't there. It is, again, Morgan Fisher. Of course, Morgan Fisher, probably best known in the Queen world as being a member of Mott the Hoople in the early 70s. Of course, the band that Queen toured with and had a raucous good time with in the early 70s in America. So, of course, the main difference is, as the band has started using synths in the 80s, the synths were kind of brought on board. You get much more of a keyboardy sound. It's a lot different than the original rock and roll vibe they had. This is definitely more of an 80s version of the track. It does get worse at times going throughout the tours, I'm not going to lie. The Works tour used it a lot as well. But going from Montreal to the Hot Space Tour and Milton Keynes, you can definitely tell a little bit of a difference. Maybe to your liking, it may not be. Listen and find out. So go in that description below. Milton Keynes, On Fire at the Bowl. Oh, and one more thing. This playlist I got this YouTube video from did actually split it up between Now I'm Here and Dragon Attack. I put both of them in there, both YouTube links in there. It starts off with Now I'm Here. It stops. You go into the sing-along, into Dragon Attack, and into the Now I'm Here reprise. So if you want to listen to both links are down there. If you want to just listen to one and say, I got it, don't need to hear the reprise at the end, that's fine. Your decision. Let's go ahead and do it. Here we go.
Down in the city, just for you and me.
There it is in all its 80s glory, early 80s glory. Keyboards are oh so present, especially in the beginning with these swirling roars. Personally, I'm not a fan. I don't like what that does to the song. I think it dates the song far worse than anything they did in the 70s or even in Montreal in 1981. The keyboards just not add to it. It makes it sound less authentic to me. And not a dig at Morgan Fisher. He's good at what he does. I just don't like the sound that it adds. I mean, quite frankly, it's not necessarily even the technology, because Roger does have synth drums in here he uses as well. They don't sound nearly as bad. If you take a listen to the track as a basic track, it does sound pretty similar to Montreal underneath all the fluff. And that's a good thing overall. If you do want some pauses from this version, I think Brian gets a little more action in his solo. Actually, that almost makes up for the synthiness. It might be one of my favorite solos of his of the officially released Now I'm Here tracks. And visually, of course, this is a lot of fun. Freddie's having a ton of fun here. The sing-along is a lot of fun. He's getting the crowd to sing like Aretha Franklin, like is one of his favorites of all time, of course. So overall, it's not a bad version at all. I do like it. I do appreciate it, especially when I'm watching the concert live. I'm just a little bit anti-synth, just like Queen was in the 70s. I'm not anti-synth all the time. I actually like synths. I like what Queen does with synths overall. This is not the place for them for me. All right, moving on now. We have 3 versions from the 1986 Magic Tour that were released live. 2 from Wembley, 1 from each day, Friday and Saturday, and 1 from Budapest from the Hungarian Rhapsody album. Now, for the sake of time, I have put all 3 tracks in the description for you to listen to. As far as I'm concerned, though, I'm going to listen to all 3 of them here and then come back and discuss all 3 of them instead of divvying them up between individual tracks. They all are somewhat similar. They're from the same tour, same time, same summer. So it's not a whole lot of difference between them, just a little bit of nitpicky stuff here and there. So let's listen to all 3, then we can come back and we'll rank them individually, and then I will move on to the next version. But right now, live at Wembley from 2 dates, and then live from Budapest and the Hungarian Rhapsody album. Let's go. And there you have the 3 versions from 1986's Magic Tour. If I'm going to rank them 1 through 3, 1 Hungarian Rhapsody version, 2 live at Wembley the second day, 3rd live at Wembley at the first day. Only reason I put live at Wembley the first day in the bottom slot is because Freddie doesn't have quite as strong a vocal performance as the rest of them. Still Freddie, still great, still powerful, just the other ones were better. Brian during this tour feels more comfortable, if that makes sense. Very comfortable feel. He does venture off and does deliver some nice solos, especially the second day I thought was a really great solo. Hungarian Rhapsody was a phenomenal solo, but the first day was even a good one as well. I feel Roger's really kind of the hero of 1986's tour. His thunderous drumming, it just fills the entire stadium. It really feels like the backbone of the entire era, really, honestly. But all 3 are very good. All 3, I would probably say, not quite as good as the Montreal days, but far better than the spacey days of the keyboards that were thrown in. I mean, the keyboards are still there, but they're far more toned down. You can barely hear the synthiness of them. It just basically fills in the space and gives it a much more full texture, which is what the keyboards really, really should do. So there we are. We're done with the 1986 concerts. We're now moving on to the next time they did it live, which is at 1992 with the Freddie Mercury tribute concert, although this isn't really Queen doing it at this point. Now, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert, organized by Brian, Roger, and John after Freddie's passing, the main event was Queen playing with a bunch of vocalists, doing a lot of Queen tracks throughout the night. Some great performances, as you probably know. You heard of George Michael doing a great version, Gary Cherone, Robert Plant, Axl Rose, Elton John. A lot of great performances on the night. Then you have the beginning part of the concert, which was a lot of the famous rock bands at the time. Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Extreme, Spinal Tap, and also Def Leppard. Now, for the most part, besides Extreme, who was pretty much the queen of the Freddie Mercury tribute concert, what Queen was to Live Aid, Extreme kind of was to the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. They performed a Queen medley, and it went over really super well. It was probably one of the best performances on the night. But for the most part, the bands did their own stuff. It's kind of like the opening act. Def Leppard, though, was able to wrangle Brian May on to do Now I'm Here. They didn't do it during the main part of the concert. It was part of Def Leppard's set. But Brian May does make an appearance, so I figured it'd be good to check in on it, especially because it was at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. So let's listen to that one right now. Def Leppard, with new guitarist at the time, Vivian Campbell, in only his second gig with the band. No pressure there, right? Your second big gig of the band is performing at Wembley Stadium for the Freddie Mercury tribute concert with Brian May, to seen over by 1 billion people. He did have a warm-up gig about 3 days earlier at a small Dublin club. This is a little bit different. But let's listen now. Now I'm Here from the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. And there you have it, Def Leppard and Brian May at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. It's a fun version. I gotta say, that's the one thing I have to say about it. It's very fun. It was definitely done in the spirit it was meant to be. It was a celebration of Freddie's life and of Queen, and the boys just had fun up there. I mean, you could say the band was a little sloppy, but let's give credit where credit's due. I mean, they lost Steve Clark in 1991. They had played one small gig 3 days before this with their new guitarist, Vivian Campbell. This is basically a re-debut of the band. They hadn't played together in a while. Just like any first gig on a tour, there's some a little bit of sloppiness here and there. But overall, it's still a great rocking experience having Brian up there with them. Joe Elliott's a fine vocalist. Obviously, he's no Freddie Mercury, but he would be the first to tell you that. He did a great job with the performance as well, though. Vivian Campbell rips a good solo in there. Phil Collins plays well. Of course, Brian is very gentlemanly, steps back, lets them have their fun, lets them have their moment in the sun, does step up and take command for a little bit of a solo towards the end. I do think it was a fun, exactly, that's the best thing you can say about it. Is it the greatest version in the world? No. Is it a fun, rockin' version? Absolutely. So that's where I stand on that. Let's move on now to a very interesting one. When Freddie had been sick, Brian had been in the throes of developing a solo album for the better part of the last half of the 80s at least. It's unrelated. He wanted to get out there and do some of his own stuff as well, just like Roger had done earlier and Freddie had done. Well, Brian would finish the album, and then he would set forth on a tour of his own in 1993. Their album came out in 1992, and he toured the world in 1993, his first ever solo tour. He was trying to mostly get away from Queen, but he couldn't do an entire concert just of his solo material. I mean, I think he understood quite well the fans were going to come to see him play some Queen tracks as well. He couldn't really completely ignore his former band's output, even though there were times he was trying to kind of establish his own identity. One of the tracks he would play, though, every night was Now I'm Here. So for the first time, we would hear the original author singing his own track. And let's listen to that now. Brian May, live at the Brixton Academy from 1993. This is Brian singing Now I'm Here. Alrighty, Brian May live at Brixton Academy. It's a very cool version. I've always been a fan of all three vocalists in Queen, Freddie, Brian, and Roger. So getting to hear the authors sing their own song is always going to be a plus for me. Brian is not obviously nowhere near as strong as Freddie. He's probably the weakest of the three, Freddie, Brian, and Roger. Brian's voice is best served usually for more of the wispy acoustic stuff he did, such as Someday, One Day, we covered already, and 39, which you may be familiar with, even though we haven't quite gotten there yet. But doesn't mean he's bad when he's singing rock and roll songs and hard rock songs. As probably the most straightforward hard rocker in the band, it makes sense that he knows what he's doing. And it's a very serviceable lead vocal. It's very good. It's just, I guess when you compare it to Freddie, it's always going to be a little lacking. But I like hearing his rasp. I like hearing his struggle in that kind of rock and roll way. You struggle to hit the high notes, not necessarily badly, but you feel that emotion in there. The band is great. Brian put together a great band featuring, of course, Spike Edney, who had been touring with them since 1984. Of course, you got the late, great Cozy Powell on drums. If you have to replace Roger's thundering drums, Cozy Powell is quite frankly one of the best options you could go with. Respect to him. Brian and him really formed a great musical bond. Of course, Jamie Moses added a second guitar, which is actually key to this track. Brian gets to do a whole lot more because he has Jamie Moses laying that whole bottom end down without him, letting him go off and do his solo stuff, which is kind of really cool. We have Neil Murray on bass and Catherine Porter and Shelley Preston doing those backing vocals, which is kind of cool to hear too. I kind of like the female backing vocals, adding a little bit of different texture than we're usually used to on Now I'm Here. It's a great version overall. It definitely is much more of a looser version. The band jam a little bit on it. Brian plays it off a little bit. He's got a little more room to spare on his own solo tour, doing his own stuff. It's really kind of a cool version to listen to. Again, it probably doesn't compare next to the full Queen band version, but this is not a bad alternative at all. And with that, we move on to the last officially released live combination. I was actually very surprised that Queen and Paul Rodgers did not do this track. I said that earlier. It feels like it would have been in his ballpark, but I don't know why they didn't do it. I don't know if Brian suggested it and Paul didn't want to. I really don't know. So it did lay dormant for a while until we moved on to the Queen and Adam Lambert combination. And Adam was more than willing to give it a shot. And as I said earlier, this is when Queen and Adam Lambert were really exploring the earlier tracks in Queen's career, hitting those anniversary moments, so to speak. Live Around the Tour album, released in 2020, featured Now I'm Here, as done by Queen and Adam Lambert at the Summer Sonic Festival in Tokyo on August 17th of 2014. So let's get into that. Now I'm Here with Queen and Adam Lambert. Well, the band still has it. 2014 and beyond, Brian and Roger still do put on a hell of a show. And Adam does put on a hell of a show as well. I know he's very controversial amongst Queen fans, much like the Van Halen thing going on. Once Freddie passed, a lot of fans thought the Queen should end. Some liked the Paul Rodgers era. And then now that Adam took over, some people prefer the Paul Rodgers era. Some prefer the Adam era. I'm someone who loves Queen, so anytime Queen plays, I can listen to it, I can watch it. But as far as this ranking goes, this is one of the ones that Adam does okay on. It's kind of a mixed bag on. I've always said a few times, you've heard me say, that Adam doesn't quite have the rock vocal that you really need. He's got more of a Broadway show tune. It's almost too clean, too crisp, too... I would say he's a great vocalist. He's got a great set of pipes, there's no doubt. But something about it is a little bit lacking to me as far as the gutturalness, the emotion, the true rock and roll edge. However, he also does a good job of being a little dramatic, and there's a little drama in here, the way the band's performed it, the way the band's arranged it. At the end there, I love how he added the down in the front with Freddie and me kind of thing, like a little nod to where he was, his station in the band, and his deference to Freddie Mercury. I can't say anything bad about that. The track itself is pretty good. It's pretty good. Brian and Roger, like I said before, they still got it. Brian seems to be much more comfortable now than he ever has been, so he's just leading through with some great licks. Roger's playing great on the powerful drums. Along he does have some help, of course, with his son, Rufus Tiger Taylor, at this point, helping him out on some percussion. It is a fun version. I'll be happy if they play it again, if they come back around one more time next year like they're talking about. But of course, I'm always going to prefer the Freddie version over the Adam version, especially in this kind of track, this rock and roll track. So that's it for the officially released live versions and officially released versions. Now we have two unofficial versions that I do want to throw out there. The first one I really want you to pay attention to. I think it's a very exciting track. Back in 1991, when Freddie was ill, Brian was asked to host a Guitar Legends Festival in Seville, Spain in 1991. It was the aim of the city to provide itself as an entertainment destination to draw support for the Expo 92, which was beginning in April of the next year, in 1992. So Brian organized a big concert with 27 top guitarists. Now just listen to some of the artists on this bill. Albert Collins, B.B. King, Bo Diddley, Brian himself, Jack Bruce, Joe Walsh, Joe Satriani, Keith Richards, Les Paul, Nuno Bettencourt, Phil Manzanera, Robbie Robertson, Richard Thompson, Roger Waters, Steve Cropper, Steve Vai, Bob Dylan, Gary Cherone, Joe Cocker, Paul Rogers. What a great, great gig. Now Brian, again, like I said, had been working on the Back to the Light album, his first solo album. But he organized this and decided to play on a bunch of tracks with different artists. He even had a couple of his own little mini set list. He played Last Horizon, Driven by You, a guitar solo, all from his solo album. He did play Tie Your Mother Down as well, a Queen song. And then towards the end of the concert, they had a couple of all-star jam sessions. One of those tracks was Now I'm Here. So you got Brian May performing Now I'm Here with Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Nuno Bettencourt from Extreme, as well as Gary Cherone from Extreme, and of course Van Halen. I mean, come on, that's an all-star cast. So I definitely say, listen, if you haven't listened to all the tracks or haven't watched all the videos from the YouTube that I've put in the description, check this one out specifically. This is a fun one. Without further ado, 1991 Guitar Festival from Spain. Brian with an all-star cast doing Now I'm Here. I mean, come on, really. That's a fucking good time right there. I'm not sure this is going to be my crown jewel, but the only reason it would not be my crown jewel is because it's only one member of Queen on stage the entire time. And quite frankly, Brian actually, you saw, if you watched the video, he does lose a guitar string and takes a little bit of time having to get restrung. So there's a little bit of time on the whole thing where there's no members of Queen on there. So it's hard for me to put that as my crown jewel number one. But I still think with all that, this is at least going to be 1A. What a great effort by Brian singing. I love hearing Gary and Nuno too, I believe, doing this. Instead of having the repeat effect in the vocals, they just had Brian sing the first and then Gary echoed it, Nuno echoed it. They actually had a live echo going on between them. I loved seeing Joe Satriani shred throughout this. Steve Vai have a great solo. Brian getting some moments as well when he's not off stage getting it restrung. I love Gary Cherone's vocals on this. A little bit rough at first, but then he gets into it. Really has that emotion going on, that rock and roll edge that Adam doesn't have, for example. And it may be a small thing, but for some reason I really love that vocal thing Gary does towards the end with the "I love you so, don't I love you?" So it adds like a rhythmic vocal part. It almost comes a rhythmic drum with the voice. That's kind of how cool it is. I admit I'm a little bit partial. Before I fell in love with Queen, before Queen was my favorite band, Extreme was my band. So seeing Gary and Nuno with Brian May and some excellent company, it's going to be hard to not love for me. And well, already we are down to one last unreleased version we're going to listen to before we get into the whole rating and rankings. This is a different version. This is a live version that Brian and Roger played, along with a very special band in their history, the Foo Fighters. Of course, we lost the late great Taylor Hawkins earlier last year now, and Brian and Roger did great tribute as part of the Taylor Hawkins tribute concerts. This was one of the earliest times they actually got together. Many times they performed Tie Your Mother Down. A lot of times they did Somebody to Love. Sometimes they did 39. This is the only time they tried Now I'm Here. And I will warn you, I think that this is not their best version, but I still think it's a fun version. So here we are, the Foo Fighters with Brian May and Roger Taylor. Now I'm Here. Okay, there it was, Foo Fighters with Brian May and Roger Taylor. I kind of forgot, I haven't watched that in a long time. While Dave Grohl's voice does leave a little bit to be desired, the young Dave Grohl does not quite have a singing power like Freddie Mercury, of course. Brian does get to sing the second verse, which made it a little bit more tolerable, I think. Nothing against Dave Grohl in general. This just wasn't his best performance. Music itself is fun, though, but most importantly, watching these guys on stage rocking out with their idols, it's just fun to see. Taylor Hawkins with a big old smile on his face. I like how they did it. They opened up with We'll Rock You, just kind of like letting Brian May come in while they drum to it. He performed wonderfully. The band itself sounds great musically, of course. And I love that at the end there, Taylor Hawkins plays the whole time with a big grin on his face, steps aside for the breakdown section so Roger can come in and have this big finale. And it's great watching Taylor Hawkins just like with a big shit-eating grin on his face, just watching his mentor really at work. It's what rock and roll is all about. That's a good time. It's not the best version of the song. It's not going to be my crown jewels, but it's definitely worth a listen or a watch every once in a while. So there we go with that. All right, there you have it. We have made our way through to the end of the show. Now all that's left is to rate the song and, of course, to pick our crown jewel. As far as a rating goes, at a scale of 1 to 11, because we always go to 11 here on PLD Projects, this is an interesting song for me to rate. I will admit that I think the studio version I would only rank about a 7 or 7.5. But the live versions and the energies behind them kicks it into another stratosphere. So overall, if we have to include the live versions, I'm giving this a solid 10.5. So yes, indeed, a 10.5. This is not just going to sneak into the top 10. This is going to go right towards the top part of the list. We're going to go past Ogre Battle, knocking it out of the 10th spot. Going past Liar, going past Great King Rat, going past Tenement Funster, My Fairy King, Seven Seas of Rye, Brighton Rock. And even going past Lily of the Valley, the last track we actually rated. So 2 tracks in a row are at 10.5, knocking them all down and sliding into that number 3, just behind the March of the Black Queen and White Queen as it began. That is where Now I'm Here is going to land, with a big rocking drumming thud. So what is the crown jewel? Let's figure it out now together. Going from the lowest of the low to the crown jewel itself, in order, this is what I have come up with. The bottom of the list, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert with Def Leppard. Again, it's fun. Def Leppard's a little sloppy, though. It just features Brian May as the only Queen member. So, end of the track. Next up, Foos and Brian and Roger. Again, more fun than great. It is better than the Def Leppard version as far as, because the fun is so energetic, and we do have both Brian and Roger doing their thing. Next up from there, we have Live Around the World. Again, Adam's a great vocalist. This one's not quite in his wheelhouse, though. It is good. It is fun. It is a great piece of work. It's just lesser compared to the Freddie versions and the other more rocking versions. Up from that, we got On Fire at the Bowl, the live in 1982 with those cheesy synths. Those synths really did a number on me. That's why this one is so low. A Freddie version that's live this low, unthinkable. But that's what happens with a small amount of synths. Not even that much. It just takes me that much out of the song. Up from there, we got Live at the Brixton Academy, Brian's solo effort. Again, great. Not in Brian's wheelhouse vocally as much as some of the other tracks would be, but this is a fun time. This is a great version. Just lacks a little bit with Freddie's playfulness. It needs a little bit more of that Freddie playfulness. Next up from that, we got the album version. Again, compared to the live version of the album, a bit slow for me, a bit less energetic. And that's the same with the BBC version from there. I put the BBC over the album version because of the extra additions and what I found to be a stronger vocal work from Mr. Mercury. Up from there, we got the Live at Wembley, the first day. Again, not Freddie's best effort, but the live vibe of it does help bring it above at least the album versions. From there, we got Rainbow 1974, probably the least confident one of the band. The mix isn't that great to Myers as well. I feel like it's a little bit missing from there. From there, Wembley Day 2, just enough to go above Rainbow 74, but pretty much on par. Hungarian Rhapsody, again, my favorite of the three 1986 versions. That's why that's going to be up to that point. From there, we get the Rock Montreal. Queen Rock Montreal is only this low, again, because of the medley. I'm not going to put a Now I'm Here and then not finish it, or have to play Dragon Attack there and then come back with a reprise. I'm not going to do that for a Crown Jewel. It is a great version, but it's got to be this low for a reason. It's this high for a reason because that's how good it is. So take that for what it's worth. From there, we got the Hammersmith 1975, a great solid earlier 70s version. At Queen really at their early tour peak, really getting into things here, which leaves us with two possibilities. The Live Killers version or that Brian May Guitar Expo version, which I gushed about. I've thought about it. I'm still thinking about it even as I'm speaking here. But I think at the end of the day, what I said about the Guitar Expo has to stay true. It is only one member of Queen, and he actually had to go off stage for a little bit for the guitar. So there is a chunk of time in there, at least a minute or two, where there is no Queen at all. So how can I make this the Queen crown jewel of Now I'm Here without any Queen members for a certain part, and then just Brian May by himself with an all-star cast otherwise? Therefore, ergo, as much as I love the Guitar Expo, and it is 1A, and I'll listen to it all the time, and you should too, the winner and the crown jewel of Queen's Now I'm Here, the Live Killers version, sped up, energetic as hell, great Freddie interaction with the audience, the sing-alongs, everything about it is pretty much a note-perfect version of the song, so that's why that is my crown jewel, Live Killers version. Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks for sticking with me throughout the entirety of this podcast. What a great track. I hope you really enjoyed getting to know some more of these versions of these well-known Queen songs. And we got more to come. Got a lot more to come. Want to join us at patreon.com/PLD Projects, where you get even more content and get a great Facebook chat group that is always talking about music, movies, and anything that our heart desires. I want to shout out specifically Allison Salamone, Brandon Buckingham, Brady Parker, Jeff Alterman, John Lastrina, Partis Chestason. Couldn't do it without you guys, and the rest of my patrons as well. Much love, of course. If you are on the YouTube for the first time, please hit that like, hit that subscribe, leave me some comments. Let me know what you think about this and all the other content we have here, such as Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film with myself and PJ Campbell going through franchises film by film, Class Action where myself, me, and Matty Gunner and Richard Eric Jarvie take two items, actors, movies, franchises, put them up against each other and see which one wins. Of course, Holy Snokes, our new Star Wars podcast for me and Matty Gunner, and of course the upcoming Harrisons, which I'll talk to you about soon. But until next time, folks, keep yourself alive, always stay rockin'. God save you. Bye now.